a very good afternoon, Sunday afternoon to everyone who has made some time to join us online. This is a online webinar brought to you by Aventis School of Management, and today we are intending to share with you well, it's a little sharing on how do we cope with anxiety and stress during the COVID-19 situation. It's also for us to share some details of our program with you. And later on, you will have the opportunity to ask questions about our program on social psychology and counseling with our representative, Mr. Kelvin. Right? But for the main part of the online webinar, I will be sharing with you a bit of what we know about COVID-19 and how it has impacted individuals' psychological health as a whole, right? So again, this is not an in-depth academic analysis of the COVID-19 situation. I'm not here to give you some global perspective and political considerations of things. I think that's not the objective. If you are here for that, perhaps it's not the correct platform. It's more of just to at least share how this situation has some very real impacts on the psychology of individuals, organizations, and even the government themselves, right? So I think that's the spirit of the session today. Okay. I'm going to move on a little bit about myself. My name is Anil. I am a senior lecturer as well as a coach, and I've been in the field of lecturing for about 10 years, and also in the field of coaching as well as counseling. So I've been with Aventis for the last 5 years. Previously, I've run a drug rehabilitation center where I help recovering drug addicts as well as their family members to go through their recovery stage. I was also in the National Addictions Management Service. That's a tertiary outfit in Singapore that deals with treatment of various types of addictions, namely drugs, alcohol, gambling, and gaming. Of course, there are many other fringe addictions, but these are the big four that we look at in Singapore. And so if you see, my experience deals largely with people who are recovering from addiction. In the school front, I am a lecturer at many institutions, both government and private institutions. And currently, I'm also with the Singapore University of Social Sciences, where I do academic coaching. So academic coaching in the sense of not tuition per se, but more of helping students understand their struggles that they are facing with school, and also to see how I can better help them from a coaching counseling perspective to reach a better state of doing well and managing the challenges, the multiple challenges that they have in life with regards to school and their academic progress. Right, so that's a little bit about me. I shall move on to my sharing today. Oh, as we speak, some of you would have really gotten wind of the news. And I've also seen some very cynical, interesting comments online. Oh, Singapore, you like to be number one, right? So finally you are number one. And we are number one in Southeast Asia for the most number of COVID-19 cases. I think part of the reasons is because the past few days we had sharp rises in numbers of between 500 to 900 plus. Right? Numbers aside, yes, we do have close to about 6,005, maybe slightly more cases of it. We have about 740 recoveries. If you do a little bit of math, that is slightly more than 10%. And we have 11 fatalities from there. But at the end of the day, these are arbitrary, these are numbers. Some people are very concerned about the quantitative aspects, and I think with numbers, it's usually a measure of how well a country is doing to manage the pandemic and so on. Now, being too fixated on the numbers somehow blinds us to other aspects of the pandemic as a whole. For instance, what's the coronavirus impact on food security? There was a very good article yesterday on food security in Singapore and how we have always taken that for granted. Right? How do we review our food production, for instance? There's the impact of coronavirus on the economy for obvious, and all of us know that, and we see how businesses are affected, people losing their jobs, some having to take pay cuts, some having to adjust to working from home like many of us, and myself in fact even. And if you think that, oh, working from home, well, what's so difficult, and it's good, you don't have to travel to work, you've got a bit more time with families and so on. Well, at a micro level, some individuals may tell you that it's very hard to juggle schoolwork or work itself with family. Some have kids running around, some have elderly parents. Some could be in a small dwelling with 7 or 8 individuals, and suddenly having to face the prospect of being with 7 or 8 individuals at home for an extended period of time. It is something that it's not whether it's a nice or not nice thing from a family perspective. It's something that needs adjustments, right? And people may not exactly see that, right? Similarly, from a country point of view, if you look at Japan, there were reports on how Japanese are struggling with working from home because all along, when it comes to work ethics and the idea of respect, of interpersonal relationship between employees and employers, Japan places great pride in working, and somehow now they have to adjust their mode of working, and it's not easy for organizations and bosses and so on to do it, right? So these are just some examples of how a global pandemic could impact a country on various levels, and to just be fixated on governance alone, that's okay. I mean, we all expect that a good government would be able to tackle all sorts of crises. But I think what's also more meaningful, at least for some of us in the social service sector, is to see how the impacts of the pandemic has now trickled in to many other areas of life. And one area is on mental health of individuals as well as organizations and even the government themselves, right? So you see here from the screen that I've shared with you, right? Worries about the pandemic see more calls to mental health helplines. And this is not just in Singapore, it's also across other countries, right? So more people are calling in, to speak to someone over the line, someone who's trained, someone who's professional, to share about perhaps their bouts of anxiety, some physiological changes to them during this period, and so on. Now, of course, there must be a reason why they're getting all this, sudden spike in anxiety levels, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, right? So you could see here that you could have situations in families where even before COVID-19, there are already incidences of abuse. Right? And you can see how this abuse is going to get worse, especially with more contact with the abuser in the homes, right? So again, I'm not going to get into this moral discussion like, oh, be thankful, that you have a nice home to be in during this pandemic and someone else is suffering in the slums and so on, and that you have a happy family with kids running around and someone else is out there in a flat where, there are abusers and they're going to get abused. So think about how this whole stay home thing is not working out for them. Yes, we can always make that distinction. People will always be moralistic about things and so on. But I think the more objective thing to think about here is, if we know that there are going to be such cases and there may be a rise in family abuse victims, then what are we going to do about it? Of course, some of us are just, commenters. We talk about it and so on. But from a services point of view, how do we put in place interventions, immediate interventions that allow us to, maybe coordinate even with enforcement and so on, to see how we could reach out to both, I think, the victims as well as the abusers. We know for a fact that, uh, bullies, for instance, are individuals who need help too, not just the bullied or the victims in that sense. Right? So this was one area that came out about the expected rise in family abuse victims. I think MSF is very busy in this front, right? And you see that domestic abuse need not only be physical, it could be psychological, right? It could be sexual, it could be emotional, right? It could also be stress that people may have from mounting debts, or the need to think about who's going to pay the bills for the next 2-3 months, and so on. I'm going to get to my key point here, so just bear with me, right? So, okay, how does this all add up, and also what's causing all this? It is a global pandemic. It is a crisis. Some have compared this to SARS, and a lot of them compare it based on, again, fatalities, number of cases, how many days the schools were closed, and so on. Sometimes the quantitative aspect of things are important. I'm not denying that. Right? But if you look at the qualitative aspect of things, I think you are able to uncover more. And that's what we try to do with some of our courses in psychology. We try to help students and prospective students to see the issue with a different lens, right? I've always shared with my students, whether it's in psychology, sociology, or international relations or security studies, and sometimes they ask me, sir, what's the hallmark of a good student in psychology? What's the hallmark of a good student in security studies or political science? I say, in whatever you do, it's not about your mastery of the concepts and the theories. Instead, you think about it as pre and post, meaning before you take on a course and before you have knowledge on psychological principles and you encounter a particular issue, in this case, COVID-19, how do you view it? And after you have gathered some psychological knowledge, you've gone through a course, you are able to appreciate the concepts and the theories, and you look at COVID-19 again. If you are able to see it differently from a psychological lens, I think that's the true value of going for the course. It is not about getting A's, it's not about nailing it and saying that, yes, conceptually, I know everything. Does it help you to change your perspective about certain things? Are you able to see a situation differently? And I think academically, that's what we want to offer in our courses, right? It's to help individuals embark on a learning journey, but also how do you measure the effectiveness of that learning journey? How do you know if you have learned something? Is it based on rote learning, memorization, regurgitation, getting good marks for the exams, or is it applying? Is it forming a new way? Is it appreciating how people may have different views? And is it about being a little more open-minded to understand that the world is full of subjectivities? Right? I think that's what we want to try to do so now in our programs. Now, coming back to this, I think the main reasons here, and this is probably my take, you may have read it from somewhere, you may have your views. I think this, generally, they're all very valid, right? A pandemic like that, right, which may not be similar to, say, SARS, because it seems to be worse now. Now, if you think about it, SARS was quite a while back. So the gap between SARS and COVID-19, it's a good, 15, 17 years more. And the very fact that it doesn't happen frequently means that the adjustment period for people, it's going to be really slow. Right? Now, that's as a whole. Now, if you look at your situation, or okay, I'm going to use myself as an example, and my mom, for instance. my sis and I had a hard time trying to help her to understand what's going on. Now, part of the reason could be because my mom is not very educated, and she's not like us, so connected everywhere we go, every day waiting and seeing, hey, what's the new number now? And what's the rise in cases? I don't think she's that connected and engaged. And as such, majority of people from our baby boomers group, that generation, would take longer to try to adjust, and forcing them and say that why you don't understand, we tell you why you don't understand, it is not really going to be very helpful for them. In fact, some level of patience could help. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the discussion of all the naughty characters who go and sit on the floor of the buses, deliberately define guidelines and so on. My take is empathize a little bit. You know, you got to bring them in, you got to arrest them because you have taken them out of the situation. Speak to them, you know, talk to them, maybe help them to understand. Because I do think that boomers take a longer time to understand than the general population. Right, so that's one. It's about the lack of frequency of things like that happening. So when you suddenly get a situation, the mind is not exactly conditioned to change so quickly, right? And this is one problem with expectations on people. And I do a lot of this with addiction and clients who have addictions, right? Family members tend to be, I understand why they're eager, I understand why they're frustrated and so on. And they say, why is this guy not changing? He went for counseling, he went for therapy, why is he not changing? And sometimes we need to politely tell them that, hey, you know, you don't change overnight, you don't change in a swap of a finger, you don't make a change of decision. Hey, I want chicken burger and then now I want fish burger. It doesn't. Uh, it's about an individual trying to adjust to new ways of thinking, new ways of feeling, and new ways of doing, right? In psychology, we talk about this very important relationship between behaviors, i.e. actions, the affections, your feelings, as well as your thoughts, the cognition part of things. And all these are related to really understand why people do the things they do. It's about trying to understand how they feel and think about things. Right. So I always remember my neighbor. She's still around, probably downstairs. Don't meet her as much as last time, maybe because she's just staying home more. She's demented, and she'll always see me and she'll ask me the same questions, right? How are you? Okay, so pleasantries exchange, and she'll ask me, what are you doing? I say, I'm teaching. Oh, and then she say, what are you teaching? And I say, psychology, and her eyes will light up. And she says, you can read my mind. I was like, Auntie, I cannot read your mind, but I can predict your behavior. I can roughly try to aggregate and explain why you're going to do certain things you do, or why you have done certain things you do. So it's a myth to say that psychology is about mind reading, and we're not fortune tellers. Fortune telling is not scientific. And if you have a sixth sense and you can see ghosts, good for you, thank you, you know, but those are not exactly part of you know, the senses that we're going to look at, right? So I think with psychology here, we can understand how COVID-19 as a stressor, so as a social situation that's a stressor, is creating very serious levels of uncertainty and insecurity for individuals. And this has translated into a type of fear, you know, very unprecedented fear. It could be someone who had encountered SARS when he's 3 or 4 years old, no? Have not much recollection. Now he's 21 and boom. Well, SARS is not really relevant to him because he has not been in it, right? So this new generation of a deeper level of fear is largely due to a sense of uncertainty as well as insecurity. And if you think about it, we're coming into maybe what, the second month, but it all started kind of in January thereabout. If it stretches up to June, July, it's more than 6 months. It's a bit chronic, right? So it's long term, and people may not be able to understand these fears. And accordingly, when you have irrational fears, irrational worries, certain types of behavior will follow, right? Because these behaviors are now guided by some irrational thoughts and irrational feelings that you have. And so when you behave that way, someone else looks at it and deems it as abnormal, when it could be perfectly normal for you because it's in response to some thoughts and feelings that you have that at the moment does not really characterize you. Now, what am I trying to drive at? I'm trying to say that the psychological impacts of such a pandemic or a crisis for that matter, or it could even be war in some other countries where people get traumatic incidences. Now, these are very real, just as much as workplace burnout is real and how we need to give attention to individuals who are recovering from workplace stress. Well, here we're not talking about workplace stress, although that could be a subset. We're talking about stress from a pandemic. So it's a crisis type of stress that individuals are facing. And not everyone has the same level of resilience. Right? We have resilience, but some of us may not know how to strengthen our resilience during this period. Right? So if we don't, then shouldn't there be more attention given to this area so that we can reach out to these individuals and perhaps offer them more platforms to be able to seek help from? I do admit that there are many community services, there are helplines, even the ministries are getting some of their staff to be manning some of these public hotlines where people can call and talk about anything. Right? The aim is really to see how we can reach out, because I think there is a recognition that there is a psychological implication of the pandemic. Right? Recently, you may have also come across a debate that's going on because there was a ruling that psychological services were not considered as essential services. So they're non-essential service. I think the intention was really to protect the practitioners as well as the patient because it's close contact nonetheless, right? The argument from the psychological fraternity or the counseling fraternity was that, well, you cannot deny the psychological impacts of the pandemic. Please ensure that you make it an essential services because we don't know what's going to happen if some of these individuals are denied treatment temporarily, what's going to happen to them at home, and they may be even endangering their caregivers. I mean, granted, these are all valid points. And then we think about how this places psychological stress on your government. Right? Yes, I know they're earning millions, they're earning hundreds of thousands, they've got the resources and so on. Now, to be able to come up front and then to make such decisions, okay, do we convert the services back to essential? What's going to happen? Does this threaten the security of others and so on? This in itself, the whole idea of decision making, being critical, being able to stand by your policy decisions, I guess these are also challenges that a group of people called the government would face. And they do get into situations where they do face mental stress as well. I think you would have read about the very elderly German minister who took his own life, right, because he just couldn't deal with the challenges that the country is facing. So that was quite sad to read. And again, we need to understand this from a point of view of how people are reacting to the crisis as a whole. Now, having painted the context for you and helping you understand the psychological concerns, how do we tackle this circuit breaker with, say, positivity? Right? These are just some suggestions, and I'm also sharing these suggestions in the sense of, based on how certain services may offer themselves to help individuals like that, to improve their mental wellness, right? Of course, what works for an individual may be different. Some say I go for a jog, some say I do skateboarding, some say I do eating, I watch Netflix, and so on. So it depends on how you take it. Now, take full advantage of this time, organize your time and set a certain schedule with activities, set routines and timetables. One must be wondering, why do you do that? Well, think about normal life. and when COVID-19 is not in, you basically go through every day, even though sometimes it gets mundane. You go through every day relatively successfully in terms of not freaking out and so on. You do face challenges, you do get stressed, you do get tired, but that's because almost every week you have a sort of routine, and so you can adjust. Now, with the pandemic and a crisis like that, your routine is thrown upside down and you find it difficult to adjust. Right? Now, certain things are beyond your control, right? And there's also uncertainty whether we would resume normal life on 5th of May. But one thing you can do is set up a bit of routines at home, so that you are guided, you've got something to look forward to. Right? Perceptually, it does help. Right? I'll give you a very simple example of how perception works. If you've got a bottle of 24 pills and you have to finish the course of antibiotics, keep the last 6 pills red, the first 18 pills white. The chances of you reaching the red pills would be a lot higher because there is that milestone to reach. Right? So if you don't have any routines, you laze around, night become day, day become night, in the long run, it could have some troubles for you mentally, so to speak. Find the ideal workspace if you're working from home. A lot of people lament, my kid's running around, that neighbors, fighting, this other guy, the cars are horning and so on. Well, see what works for you. I understand that not everyone has the best and ideal situations at home, right? So maybe you could think of looking at how you could arrange that, because when you're comfortable in your workspace, you tend to be a bit more relaxed, you tend to be calmer. Okay. Some other points, I thought the 4th point is very important, and I just set a reminder on my phone and I say, call Papa, so call my dad after, because we usually meet like once a week or once in 2 weeks at our favorite hawker center at Jalan Bersih. We'll sit there, have some drinks, have some food, and that's my interaction with him. And this goes on for 3-4 hours. It's very consistent, and suddenly now our routines are taken apart, and I felt that while I am constantly engaging with people, talking to myself on the screen, sometimes there's interaction with others, what would the older folks go through? I mean, they have their own modes of entertainment, but many of them have been detached from the community. So staying in contact, maybe helping them do a little bit of video calls, getting them to use it more often. You'll be surprised that they might tell you after a few rounds that, hey, I think this works. At least I can see you on the screen, right? So try to stay in contact with family and friends. That's very helpful. Schedule rest breaks and make them part of your day-to-day routine. Right? Some people have too much rest time, so depending on your situation, you could find an interest or develop a new skill. Or I think a lot of people are doing that. A lot have gone to cycling. Some have gone for jogging and so on. Some are doing a little bit of a slower brisk walk, so they can be out there and maybe don't have to wear a mask and so on. But there are a bit more people exercising. Some are doing online sessions with yoga. Some are still keeping with their faith online. So there are quite a lot of things you can do online or with your phone, for that matter, if you don't have a laptop or a PC. Right? And of course, taking up a course and so on, these are things that are very viable. A lot of schools are now quickly adjusting to online learning, and systems are in place. Yes, you do hear about all the stories about security measures. Let me tell you on hand, I have used Zoom from January until now. I've got no one coming into the session showing me pornographic pictures and telling me, Anil, please strip for us to see. Not yet, right? But we had an encounter with that in the primary school. So people get really alarmed. And so I do understand. If you understand the theory behind security, there's really no 100% guarantee of security. All you need is a weakest link, right? So a weakest link and one loophole and you go in. But security measures are put in place. So things like Zoom can carry on. You have a lot of other things like Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. So these are all platforms And schools are, I believe, equipped, right, to ensure that the course runs smoothly and so on. I'll share a little bit more, if I can, about how my online classes have gone. And generally, there's a strong level of positivity from my students. Okay, so I think counseling, understanding psychology, these are valuable skills that you may want to consider if you are intending to take up a course or learning something new or something to value add, in fact, even or to complement something that you do in your workplace. A lot of my students come from everywhere. I've got students from HR, I've got students from finance. I even have a guy who's in engineering, and I say, "What are you doing here?" And he says that, "Well, I think work is very stressful. My boss is giving me more stress, and I find it increasingly difficult to deal with my stakeholders. So I'm just trying to use this as a course to help me understand myself better and perhaps to improve my interpersonal relationships with other individuals." I think that really captures the whole essence of trying to learn something in counseling and psychology. Yes, we all want it to translate into some career options in the future, sure, but I think there are also more benefits. I give you an example. Out of 10 students who meet me for the first time, I ask them, "Why do you do counseling or why do you do psychology?" 8 out of 10 will tell me, "Because I want to help someone, because I want to go and be a counselor, because I enjoy psychology, I think it's interesting." Or it could be like, "My neighbor, can you read my mind?" All those. Only 2 out of 10 will tell me that I take psychology because I want to understand myself better. We call that intrapersonal intelligence, whereas the other would be more interpersonal. I think that intrapersonal aspect is very important. If you want to go and do conflict resolution, you want to go and enhance your relationships with others, shouldn't you be able to understand yourself better first, right? You want to have better EQ, doesn't that come from within, right? So I think some of these courses, besides a career option, have this to offer as well. Yeah, so the program that we are going to talk to you about, and if you have questions, you can always direct them to Kelvin. We're looking at social psychology as well as counseling in this graduate diploma. And just to give you some snippets of each, when we talk about social psychology, it's very interesting, right? Some people say, "Hey, is social psychology something like sociology?" Well, I can tell you that sociology and psychology are cousins, and social psychology is a nice, marrying of the two. Now, a lot of people think that psychology is just you. So I just want to study the individual, his thoughts, his feelings, and his behavior. Very nice. But if you tell me that the individual is someone who exists in a silo, working on his own, up in a mountain like a hermit, not exactly, right? Anywhere you go, that individual needs to be understood in a context. And this context refers to society, this context refers to other people around you, this context refers to the environment that is influencing your behavior. And I think in social psychology, we want to do just that. We want to understand the social factors that influence an individual's behavior. Right? Because it's not enough to say that your behavior stems from your genetic disposition, your behavior stems from your hereditary aspects, and you are just you. It's only your mind's working that results in you behaving that way. Right? Studies have shown, the behaviorists, for instance, have come on board and say that, when you come into this world, your mind is a blank slate, and all behaviors are learned. We learn these behaviors through the interaction with our environment, right? So it's impossible to discount the social aspects of how it influences our behavior, right? So for example, in the course of social psychology, what you see here is a list of topics that we do in that particular module, Perspectives of Social Psychology. Wonderful module. We do it over a weekend. Students are engaged. There's so much room for them to share their views, and overall they learn the key concepts in the module. And of course, they do their assignments, they apply it, and some still come back to me and say that, "Hey, what I've learned in the graduate diploma was so valuable that when I go on to do something else, or when I bring it back to work, it was easy for me to apply and better understand situations that I face. Right. So for example, aggression, we all have anger. And why do some of us get aggressive and some of us don't? Right? It's always interesting, and people would like to focus on those people who are aggressive. Right? It's like in criminology, right? Something else that I teach. We are fixated with trying to find out why people commit crimes. What are the reasons? So fascinating. It's so nice. Why don't you also ask the other simple questions? Why do people not commit crimes? No one really asks that. If you try to understand why people not commit crime, it gives you an insight into why someone would commit crimes. Right? So pretty much here in social psychology, we try to give students a critical perspective of things, not just feeding them with concept, and say, nah, go and learn this, regurgitate, go for the exam, do your best, pray hard, God will do the rest. It doesn't work that way. It's about really trying to be immersed in the course and seeing how you can build on this, what I call a knack for thinking differently. Right? And I think some of our courses here allows you to develop that. Right? A little bit of counseling here. Some of you are very interested in this field. You probably see counseling as something that's engaging. It's value adding. It's something that's noble, and you can help individuals who are in troubled lives. And I do agree with that. And here we try to provide an introduction of some counseling types. Of course, if you tell me you want to get into a greater specialization of counseling, we do have a program in partnership with Roehampton University from the UK. Currently, we've just started one batch, and we have students who took it, and I'm taking one module with them. And it's quite an interesting journey so far. They're getting hands-on counseling. We're trying to assess them whether they're ready to do the counseling. And once they're done with that first two initial modules, they're on, and they'll be put on placements and so on. It's a very robust program, and this is something that you can consider after your graduate diploma. And I think Kelvin and team would be in good state to answer your questions on that. Right. Some types of counseling techniques, you got direct counseling techniques where the therapist is largely in charge, and it's very directive towards the client in helping the client get out of his or her predicament or mess or confusion or distress, if you like. The non-directive approaches, for example, a person-centered therapy by this guy called Carl Rogers, they prefer to, or rather they believe that individuals have that ability to get out of their situations on their own and to be to be fully functioning individuals. So the therapist's role then is to facilitate and guide the client to discover their own solutions to their problems. Now you may be thinking, hey, crazy, or what? I give you money and then you're supposed to counsel me, now I counsel myself. Some people think of it that way, but if you understand the theories and the rationale behind person-centered therapy, the counselor the therapist is still in a way in charge, but more of trying to use an approach where it's more bottom up rather than top down. And once an individual is able to discover some solutions to their own problem, of course with the help and guidance of a therapist, I tell you, it works wonders, because after the therapy session, when they face other challenges in life, whatever they learn in the counseling session is going to be very helpful for them in devising their own solutions, in being resilient. For example, I think that's what we want to try to achieve in counseling. And of course, you have cooperative counseling techniques where it's a little bit of both. Right? So this is just some initial snippets. If you are very interested in this, I think we've got a good set of counseling programs lined up for you. Now, just a little bit more about my take on things. Critical factors. Okay, so we are still on the counseling part. So how we want to avoid personal judgment on our clients. And they sometimes come and they present, very challenging life circumstances. Sometimes these challenges, you look at it and you get a shock. I never thought these kind of challenges existed. And if you don't experience their reality, are you able to counsel them? I think that's the question that we want to ask. Of course, from a conceptual point of view, yes, but I've always maintained to my students that counseling in books is not the same as counseling in theory. It's quite similar to policing. Policing in books is not the same it's not the same as policing in practice. You can get A, for law. You can get A for person-centered therapy. And then practically, when you face the client, I think that's where the adjustment go. It's just like a policeman, right? You go and see a situation, you're supposed to arrest a guy. Hey, hold on, wait, I take out my manual. According to chapter, the fellow would have run off. You may be very good, but in practice, what do? So in counseling, when you face the client and you deal with their challenges, you realize that your biases, your views, your thoughts, all these things have to be suspended, because if you don't, it might even bring the client more harm. Right? So we do a lot of coaching in that area, trying to help students understand what counseling is really about and what it involves. Active listening and so on. Yeah. So a little bit of my take just to round up this part of things. And I'm so glad that, I'm looking at a participant rate. Those who came in, you all have not left. I really appreciate you being in here, spending 1 hour of your Sunday evening. Now, I think individuals have to start normalizing anxiety. It's perfectly fine to be anxious, but I do understand that too much anxiety to a point where fear becomes irrational is not entirely healthy, and some of them may go on to need professional help, as you would have seen based on reactions of some individuals who, in a way lost it. When we say normalize anxiety, we also need to recognize that our anxiety is being shared by others. There are others who are also as anxious as us. When we are able to accept that there's this level of anxiety out there, I think it's easier for us to cope, right? Because then it doesn't become something that's abnormal or unique or peculiar to us. In fact, everyone else have that level of anxiety, and we should try to understand one another, right? So normalizing something could sometimes be beneficial. Go easy on yourself. I do understand, I'm very empathetic. I do understand that people have challenges, there are bills to pay, job is uncertain, some have lost their jobs and so on. Go easy on yourself, try to seek help, look out for community resources, try to see, if there are people out there who may direct you to these resources. Some individuals may be too shy to go and look for help and so on. Right? If at this point in time you have to settle for something lesser, go a bit easier on yourself, because there's really no point in being overly hard on yourself. It can affect your mental health further. Okay, again, my disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is easy. It's always easy to say, difficult to do. Right? So I do understand that some individuals could find this situation a lot more challenging than others. Call a counseling crisis hotline. Some turn to their faith. Some look for help elsewhere. I think having that sense of connection is very important, because suddenly we feel disconnected from a lot of things. Right? And this whole stay home thing, won't be surprised for some individuals, is like the number of hours at home is probably equivalent to, say, maybe 6 months when they are working, because some of us are just mainly out most of the time and we come back simply to rest and do our basic chores. Right? Above all, mental health, there's this mind-body connection. Some of you have read it. If you're interested, read up health psychology. Look up this guy called George Engel, E-N-G-E-L, 1977. George Engel talks about a biopsychosocial model of health, in which he explains that health is not only physical. Health is also psychological. Health is also social. And you'll see how these three domains interact with one another to give us this thing called wellness. Right? If you talk about well-being, there's a lot more than just physical, psychological, and social well-being. There's career well-being. There's work, career well-being. There's community well-being with how integrated you are with your community. So I think health is a broad range of things, and apart from psychological health, we should also be mindful about our physical health, and then we do have that capability to perhaps increase our mental resilience on our problems. Right? Now, I just wanted to share a little bit. So this is, you can find more information about Aventis and their courses, right? For example, that on social psychology and counseling, as well as our master's program. So that's the website in Aventis. These are some pictures of past students and our faculty who have taken the course, and well, many of them, well, in fact, all of them you see are working adults that come with them with different experience and so on. So I think the learning curve as well as the learning opportunities for fellow classmates, it's very it's rich. It's not, we don't just have people from one particular industry. So I just feel that the environment is very healthy and very conducive for learning. Now, of course, here we have some information. Kelvin is still in the chat, so I'm going to pass it over to him very soon. In the event that you have to run and you need more information, that's Kelvin's email, kelvin@aventisglobal.com, and that's his contact number. And you are also able to download our brochures from the website that's given. Okay. I'm just going to leave this here for a while. We have a group chat here. So if you have any questions for us, please let us know. You can type it out. Okay. Or if you find that you have to go and do something else, the details that you see on your screen would be available. And I think Kelvin, who is also working from home, will be on hand to respond to all your questions. Right? Above all, thank you for listening to me. And yeah, thank you. Okay, over to some questions if you have for Kelvin and I.
Queen Me, I'll take it offline with you. I'll give you a I'll drop you an email regarding the course details about that and all that. We'll take that offline. Anyone have any questions for Anil?
Yeah, so the course fee, subsidies, and
skills
credit as well.
I'll drop you an email regarding that. No worries.
Good. Thank you for all the thanks. It's very nice. You are most welcome. I've got a question here from Jessica O. How would we explain more to the younger generation? So I'm taking it as, how do we explain the COVID-19 situation to them? Or are you referring to psychology as a whole? Yeah, thank you, Hapsa. Good to see that you're on board. As in, Jessica, are you referring to the explanation? Okay, to COVID-19, yeah. Younger generation, I suppose you are referring to the kids, the teenagers, and children, for example. Yeah, I've got my nephew, he's 7, just went into primary 1 in January, having a ball of time, coming back every day excited, and then suddenly we tell him, hey, he cannot go to school anymore. Our friend totally got so confused, and he didn't understand everything that's going in. It's very hard to absorb. He see people reading news, he's not understanding. I think you could explain to them slowly in terms of trying to explain not the very technical bits of things. Maybe explain to them that currently there is this health problem that's going on, and it's not safe for people to go out. I think they do understand some of these basic things, right? But also getting them to adjust to the fact that they may not be able to have that kind of close contact with others, right? And they need to be sticking close with their families for the time being, and that everybody else is trying to also adjust. I think with kids, you can see me struggling a little bit with kids. Typically, I do admit it's a good question from Jessica. That's probably harder. Some teenagers are still quite ignorant of the issue. They're still meeting up with people, having close contact. I think that's where the education bit really needs to come in for this group of people. Right? Unfortunately, a lot of people are also very sensitive. If you kind of tell them what to do, it's hard to get through. I do understand that the rebels in the millennials, sometimes they have a, very in Hokkien, we use a dialect, we say bo chap. And I think this is more serious if you look at the US situation. Now, you've got a bunch of Trump supporters who are diehard Republicans coming out in society to protest against staying home. And they say, look, what are you guys all up to? There's no pandemic. I think they are the real rebels. Right? But good, thank you for your questions. The part, okay. More concern, yes. Any tips to share about cabin fever? Yes, I think cabin fever, it's a real thing. We may not be seeing it now. This is what? Today is the 7th, today is 19th. So we are into our 13th day. Next Monday, tomorrow will be 2 weeks. Probably by third week and fourth week, you'll see some people getting very restless. Now, I think here's the thing that many of us may not be appreciating. We still can go out of the house, and we still could be using some area within the vicinity, although we're not supposed to loiter. Right? I think getting out of the house every day based on a schedule, I see a lot of elderly doing it, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. I think that helps, because if you're just going to stay cooped up, I do take Christina's point that cabin fever may become a serious problem, right? And some people may develop complications here. Right. Question from Sam: how can we help the older senior citizen cope when they're required to stay at home and change their entire routine, like what Christine shared on cabin fever? Yes, I think some older people, those who are a lot more out. So you got two groups, right? One like to stay at home and their TV and so on, and they may have tiredness and leg pain and so on and so forth. So we try to encourage them to be out for exercise sessions and so on. Those who are required to stay at home more and their whole entire routine of not being in the community and so on is out of action, these are the individuals that are going to struggle a lot more, right? I think from an organizational point of view, some of these elderly affiliated organizations or even places, where typically they hold volunteer service and they provide activities for elderly, I'm not sure how they're going to see the opportunities to engage elderly online. This could be a challenge because not many of them may have their own devices and they may not know how to use some of this. But I think that there's really could be some engagement with getting the elderly people online for some services or activities, but it's going to be hard. It's probably no one really have conceptualized it. Maybe some organizations are doing it. I'm not very sure. They should still be out, although it's going to be difficult. They can't congregate and so on, so they may feel that sense of loneliness, right? So I think this point for the questions from Sam and Jessica does reflect that more is needed. I think organizations have to step in to devise perhaps some activities if the seniors are required to stay at home to engage them, so that there is some level of connectedness and they don't feel too out of it. Can you repeat the title? Oh no, Erica, it's not a book by George Engel, but it's So George Engel, 1977. It's a bio-psycho-social model of health. You can easily Google this up. He gives you a take on how health should be approached and studied. So that's something that we do. Yeah, gamers, they're pretty happy with being at home. So they already have their own cabin even before COVID-19. Will the DIP able to help mid-career change entry? Would love to work in hospitality. Yes, I mean, if we are going to see that there is a predicted rise in the number of people who's seeking help, or more organizations coming on board with services. Today, I even see how some services are going online. I'm very, very sure that in healthcare, hospital, even in community health or healthcare settings, definitely there would be a demand for counselors and psychologists alike. So yes, I think a mid-career change is definitely viable, Queen Mee. War casualties, yes, those guys who have post-traumatic stress disorder, right? There will be long-term effects from the pandemic. I think even caregivers or family members who have lost their loved ones to if you look at Italy and Spain, and they don't even allow family members to come into contact, not even during the time where the bodies were burned, and they couldn't even come into contact with the ash, right? So imagine that kind of heartbreak that is for the families. And I think, yeah, there definitely needs to be counseling services from them, and probably in the area of grief, to help them to manage the grief that they are facing with the loss of a family member. And it's going to be an uphill task, but probably direct them to a level of acceptance on the situation. It's not going to be easy. So that's Christina's point on counseling services for the effects on those who have passed on because of the virus. Oh yes, Mr. J, there's parents to think about home-based play. I like that term. And learning for little ones while working from home. Children get restless very easily, yeah, because they can't run around to release their energy. Right? Yeah, I think it's how comfortable people are about letting their kids. I still, my nephew who is 7 still goes down and I think he knows every single pillar or wall around the void there. I ask him how come. He said, every day I run from one end to the block, I come back. And you're right, they just wanted to release their energy, and the fact that grandparents now can't be in close contact, so the stress does add on. Right. Good, thanks for that point. Hospitals look for bachelor degree in. Okay, so Erica, I'll leave this to the the Kelvin and team to advise you on the requirements there. Okay, what a session. Any more comments? Kelvin, what do you think?
Right. Anyone has any other? I think you've answered most of them. So, anyways, I thank you very much for the time.
No problem.
Right? Thank you very much, and everyone, thank you very much for your time as well. So, if anyone has any questions, my name is my name and numbers on the screen website as well. So you can download a brochure, or can give me a call anytime, or drop me a WhatsApp, or if you want more details of the program. So, Anu, once again, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you,
right, thank you very much.
Have a good week ahead, everyone. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll end the session.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you.